Good morning. It is March the 5th, 2025. It's Norma Cowie's time for Norma Talks. And today I'm talking about past lives and past life regression. I remember way back when I was starting to get into metaphysics, tarot was my first introduction, and I studied it for many years. During that time, discovered I definitely wasn't an astrologer. I was more of an intuitive than I call it a mental person. Not mental crazy, but thinking and putting things together that way. And not that I haven't done that on lots of topics, yes, but for astrology, after 3 years trying to get it, my husband and my daughter, both astrologers, different kinds, but that was up their alley, not me. But what I did find very quickly was past life regressions. Now, we all heard about past lives, that we were different people in different ways and different time periods. And so I had read a number of books on it and things like that. But it wasn't until I attended a past life regression workshop with Marcia Moore, and then later on again with another person whose name all of a sudden evades me, that I began to recognize the importance of past lives. You see, up until I began to recognize the importance of transforming the energy, what was happening, I learned these techniques of going back and seeing myself in another lifetime and understanding it and everything. But what was missing was how to transform the energy. And I figured that out myself after a number of years, actually. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my process of coming to terms with a lot of things about past lives. We are made up of many, many different aspects of ourselves. And from the moment we come into this life, based on the events that occur outside of us, will be where we are attracted to different lives, because we'll remake the same decision we made back there. And there are future lives, so sometimes they're future ones, but we tend to think of past lives in the past. But just to be on the safe side, philosophically, they can also be future lives. Most of us can't get our heads around that very well, like having a life in the future and seeing that, but they definitely are there. If you want to, you might say, be brave to go begin to look at that as well. But, in my early ones, I did a lot of work with Marcia Moore, who was my first example to that. Even attending that workshop was for myself, which was, by the way, absolutely packed. By that time, I was working as a reader in a metaphysical bookstore in Surrey, British Columbia, and I was late getting there. That was another story beside itself. And so when I came in, the room was full with everybody lying on well, at that time they were sitting on the floor, where eventually you ended up lying on the floor. And so I opened the door, kind of crept in, and I was the last one in, right by the door. And the experiences I had there made me begin to recognize aspects of myself as to why and how. Now, it was very simply done. We were able to see ourselves in another lifetime. And when you're doing a group regression, there's no one really leading you except this basic things. Take a look around, see what you're at. And you pretty well have to remember and know what's going on. Marcia had written a book called Hypersentience. Now, she was very involved in astrology. So, and I spent some time with her personally, doing readings for her, and we were talking about these past life regressions and how they work. I had a private session, and she had a reading, and, things worked out that way. The first lives I did were basically through her technique, and I explored a lot of lives. And I remember most of them still to this day, and I'll tell you why. That was because there was no transformation work done with it. We were just looking. It was like reading a book, and and then you remember the book, and it comes up again. You go, "Oh yeah, I remember in that book this and this and this happened." And I did. I remembered all my early lives. In fact, in my book that I wrote, Many Lives and Many Ways of Remembering Them, all my early lives, I definitely read, well, not all of them, but some of them are written up in there because I remembered them because they never ever were, they were not transformed for a long time after. The second person that came, Brian Jameson, sorry, that was his name. He was from Colorado. He was a radio man. I think he was a salesman. I don't think he was on air. And he had written a book called Explore Your Past Lives. And they had been a group of them in Denver who had once a week met and did different past lives. And he had written his book. And again, a different technique, and a technique that I always used with intellectual people, which often was mostly males. Males, women are more somehow easier to be more into the feeling line, and men, it's very practical. And I found if I had I was going to say a subject, if I had a client that was having one and having difficulties, I would often transform into using that Brian's technique because it's very logical. And when you're dealing with a person who's a very logical person, you need logic, and his technique fitted that criteria. So I had quite early two techniques to utilize. So I began doing workshops myself. And I would do all day workshops. And I did all day workshops. It would be that in the morning time before lunch, we would use Marcia's technique, which is very much like visualization, creating a rainbow bridge to walk across into another time, another place, situation like that. And so people would have that experience. Then we would have lunch, go away and eat or whatever. Then we'd come back and I would do Brian's technique, which was, I said, much more logical, much more. It was like a switching off through breath and switching off your body. And then similarities, then you begin to see yourself in another time and place. So the workshop was designed with these two workshops. And then we would have a break again. And then for the last, I would say, well, which technique would you like to do again? Like, and sort of do a group analysis as to who would like to do what. And in this particular workshop, I had an uprising, basically. And when I think about it now, I could have handled it probably a little differently. But they said, well, no, we want to do another one. Well, obviously they could have voted A or B, except me sitting up there reading this comes up on the spot with a technique, a whole new different technique, and a technique that I have used ever since, which is now a lot of years. And that was kind of a combination probably of a lot of things. But in the meantime, because by that time in my own world, I become very clear of the importance of releasing energy that was blocked or stuck, not just observing it, not just becoming aware of it, but letting it go. And so my technique, which I did for the very first time with this group of people with great success, which I was very thankful for, began, and I began then to just use it. When people came for Past Life Regression, I'd use it. And then workshops. Still often, a full day workshop I design on the three techniques, but usually I found I would be doing smaller workshops with my own technique. What do I call it? My Norma Cowie's technique. But it's about how do you get there? How do you get to see yourself in another lives? Now, we talk about past lives as most of us who experience as fact. A lot of people still don't believe that. They think they're this life that they're in, and that's it. There's nothing more, there's nothing before, there's nothing after. Now, the thing is, relating that it's not always digital, like we go way back here and come, excuse me a moment. I've got a cold that's kind of coming and my nose drips a little bit. So I must excuse me for that. And a little bit of a cough, and I'm trying to keep it under control, but it's sort of colds don't always, the old saying, don't wait for, no, we don't wait for any man or no man. That's what happens. So anyhow, and that's by the change of the weather, like it's changing from super cold to sometimes cold, sometimes warm, sometimes the other. But heading, of course, into warmness, which is always suitable for me. But let's talk about this thing about time and space. You could have your life right now, which is 2025, and you're alive. Well, the next one may be just down the road, or it could be back. You could be alive at two times, the same time period in two different lives, or three, or four. Hopefully, mostly not. We don't tend to overshadow too much. But in the beginning, I did a lot of lifetimes way back, way, way, way back. And boy, I was here. When I say I know I've been around a long time, I've been around a long time. I was like caveman type things. But because very often there was a lot of trees, and we had no way to get down a river but sitting on a log, a tree that had fallen down, putting it in and sitting on it. But we had fur clothes, and we had to be careful of that because you could fall off. And if you ever have tried with fur getting wet, very often you drowned that way. Very often in those kind of lives, we perhaps didn't live very long. People's 30 you would be an old man or woman. Then also during in times, being a soldier or a person that's very involved in fighting, in different criteria. And at that time, I did a number of lifetimes in the Roman army or in Roman times. Quite a lot. And that's one reason I think when I got really well into, I've always been a history buff, that I did explore a lot of that time period because I understood it. There's lots of different time elements that you begin to experience. Now, what significance is that there's a tendency for us to keep recreating the same thing, scenarios. And why that is because when we hit an emotion, we reach back in our memory banks and we end up making the same decision that we made last time, even if it's another lifetime. So and I say that could have been a future life, but you still make the same decision with that same emotion because our consciousness is in this time, in this period. And that's why I like to really state that even though we may have lived in many other times, and not only on this planet, but other planets, but we're not going into that today, is that when you hit an emotion, because especially on Earth, because Earth is an emotional planet, according to me, is that you're going to make the same decision that you've made every time, unless you've done some clearing work on that. Then you're entitled to make a whole different decision. There are some interesting time periods of how we repeat patterns, even in our own lives now. If we're old enough, like myself, and you can see that even in this life we will make the same pattern often in our personality and our emotional decisions and how we handle or deal with things, even though we know better and we work to change those. There's still a habitual response very often we have to certain emotions. And that happens in the beginning. From when we were little, we start putting these things into place. We make these decisions. We reflect back to the last time we experienced the feeling, and we remake the decision we made then. So by the time you're 3, 4, 5, you have hooked in a lot of different lifetimes and started creating what we call a personality, often based back there. I used to have nightmares as a child. I used to have tremendous nightmares. Well, in logical time, I was in Germany in the Second World War. Ended up dying by being beaten up by the soldiers with their black boots. And all. There's a story about that I'll share with you in a minute. And so I had been part of the resistance, even though as I was an entertainer at the time, believe it or not. I was a singer and in nightclubs, and I was an entertainer, but I was also part of the resistance. And then I had been picked up, and of course I was a pretty young gal, and so the soldiers wanted to have their way with me, and I fought them, and they kicked me. They kicked me in particular when if you're being kicked over, and you see it in movies, people huddle over a kind of to protect the front parts of them. And so their back is exposed. I basically was kicked to death in my back. Today, from the various things, I've had a lot of back issues and had to do a lot of work with my back over time, which makes a lot of sense when you begin to explore these things. Anyway, I think I got myself a little regress back there. But what I'm trying to say is that our tendency is to reach back to the emotions that we have and remake. Now, this is the bigger aspect. Remake the decisions that we made then. And that's what our tendency is. So why we do past life regressions is because we can go back and we can release and clear all the reactions to that decision that we will make then and now, and probably in the future if we don't change it. So this is one of the elements of deals with personal growth. That is probably the best thing that I really found. I mean, I've done a lot of different kinds of therapy work that some of it I've created myself through clients growing and me needing to adjust with them. But also understanding that there is I can't say the trouble with that word, a length of time that we go through. Lifetimes are not always after one another. Not at all. You can bounce all over the place. But you're looking for a place of knowing. One of the reasons I was born, so I was born in 1944. That was before the war was over. We know that I died in Germany. And yet I'm born in New Zealand. Now, there's two reasons for that. One is I knew my father. I'd had lifetimes with my father before. And my mother was a really kind, loving person, number one. Number two, it was a long way away, from all the fighting and the war and all the things that go on there. And remember, by that time, the end of the war was beginning to come. And so Germany was really under a lot of pressure. There was a lot of pressure going on. A lot of people were getting out of the place. And I got out not in the way I really intended. But if you understand circumstances, you can see why, as a soul, I did what I did. As I moved to the other side of the world where there is no war. And to this day, thank goodness, I have not been in a war zone, and I choose not to. That's not what I particularly want, or part of my, you might say, karma at this point of time in this life. But that's just coming up to this present, is understanding how we progress through time. I still had situations happen in my life when I was younger that I would reach back to other situations that were similar. Not necessarily war times, although I did a lot of exploring. Once I knew how to do this, I would go to bed at night and take myself and go explore another life. And then when I realized the importance of letting go of the decisions and the energy, I had to go back and redo all my early lives that I had done. And that's why I remember them so well, is because they weren't really cleared easily. One of the ones I'd like to talk about is, I always remember this, is that I was a British seaman on three, the masted boats with the sails and everything. And we were down off around Fiji. I'm pretty sure it's Fiji because I know the islands. I've been to some of them, and I have been to Fiji myself. And it was outside of Fiji, and because the Fijians are very dark, black skinned. They're a different race than the Polynesians. There's Polynesians, then there's also Melanesians as well. If you come up closer to Indonesia and stuff like that, they're different again. But anyway, my memory is being there. And anyway, I was shipwrecked. So were several other people, but I managed to swim to shore. So I was there. I was taken in. I was treated like just the same as anybody else. Big part of the, you might say, tribe, part of the group. Anyway, I was out on the rocks, sort of spearfishing, what we would call it today. And I slipped. And I really badly gashed myself on the rocks. Well, what happens is that there's nothing to take my leg off. See, normally in that case, what they would do is be amputate up just above from the leg. So where it is gashed and not healing. So I actually died in that lifetime with a lot of pain. And because there was no axe. If we'd had an axe, we could have taken the leg off above where it was hurt. But I couldn't. And that's happened. I see that a lot in different people's, when I've regressed people at different times, where in modern times it would be nothing. We would just go this, and this, and everything be done. In olden times, we didn't have that. We didn't have certain things at certain times. As I said, that I believe I mentioned this, was, being on a log and falling off with the furs, and so you drown because the furs are all heavy, because we haven't got an axe or anything to take the wood off and make it like a canoe. It is fascinating to explore where you have been. It is fascinating not only to recognize that, yes, you have been alive on this planet many times and in many different ways, male, female, you've had leadership positions or just, regular, whole lot of things that you experience and go through. So that in this lifetime, when a situation comes out, one trusts that makes a different decision. And often we do not, because we reach back and we remake the decision that we made then. So we put it in play one more time. Part of the growth is understanding the decisions, because the decisions are held in the subconscious and they come with the soul. When you leave this life, any time, and you go out and you look again, some people jump very quickly. Other people take longer as they begin to become more aware. You all put it awareness, and they begin to choose more. But they still have the decisions made, the energy there, which will tend to attract similar things that they've already gone through. Conflicts, misunderstandings, health issues also can crop up. And so it's one way in which we can look at that we can actually begin to self-heal, to become aware of the sense of who we truly are, to reconnect on a spiritual level, to reconnect with this planet, to reconnect with the love, the essence of what the planet also wants to create for us. All of that experiences are there. One past life regression isn't necessarily going to do all the things, but it's an opening to, and I have done many, many, many over my lifetime, not so much now, but I'm kind of at the end part, but it's like, it's an interesting element I find, and I always enjoyed doing the workshops wherever I went. So I am actually offering on the 15th, a small workshop to take a look at a life and take a look at it as a group, a small group. Anyone interested, get hold of me through the website, which is norma.cowie.com. That's easy to do. And it's an experience. Now, I used to have videos, tapes, and all that as well. And some of that can be reprised. But, COVID came along and changed so many things. And even though sometimes I know I say that, but how it changed my life, from traveling and teaching and doing all these different workshops for people. And it's a few years now, I think 20, 20, whatever it was, 20, it was fun, but it's a good 5 years. So 2020, somewhere in there, all this began. Oh, I don't know. I've lost sight of the different years, even hardly time to remember this one. And we're already in March, so here we go. But it's really about being able to get as much information from what I've experienced and gone through as I can out to anyone who's interested in really coming to understand the journey that they're on. Because that's what it is. It's a personal journey that you're on, and trustingly growth, becoming, I'm going to say, more of who you truly are, and not just all the programs that we run, because we do tend to run them, and we want to be able to move in a whole different direction. And I think that is all I have to say today. Between my voice and this cold thing, which started yesterday, Monday night, when I was doing mental mind treatments, I actually took some cough medicine before, because I was beginning, and then I've just been feeling a little sluggish, but I'm holding up, which is good. And so I just want you to be aware that your life right now is a pinnacle of many other lives that have come together. And based on the experiences that you've had in this life, you will have attached yourself to certain other ones. Probably not all of them. I went looking for a lot that weren't really attached, but I just wanted to go and find out here, there, where, or whatever. Have I been in this place before? Because I love to travel, and I traveled a lot and went to a lot of spiritual places, as well as just regular big towns, cities, etc. And it's like I would check, have I been here before? I could tell you one story before I go, because this was very indicative. I've told this story on another show, so I'm sorry if you're having to listen to this again. When my children were small, my husband was a school teacher, so Christmas holidays, etc., like this, we would get in the car and we would head to California, where the weather was nice. And plus, my husband then had family down there. Whenever we got to San Francisco, I would be very unhappy. I would not be happy. We would always drive through, because I'd say, don't stop. We'd stop at Santa Rosa, which is north, or we would stop earlier. And it just, don't go to California. Don't go there. And then a few things I had to go down. I went down for a tarot conference, and I was there, but still always unsettled. Always just get me out of here. Let me get home. Anyway, we were putting on a psychic fair in San Francisco, and I had to spend a week there. So as soon as I got there, I knew, okay, I've got to do something about what's going on about this San Francisco and me thing. So in my motel room, I laid myself on the bed and started my process. What I found out was I was a Russian seaman on a boat that was tied up in the San Francisco Bay. And I've got I think it's 06, I think it's 1806, that's it. Anyway, it was when the big earthquake and the fire happened in San Francisco. I don't know it. And not only did they have the earthquake, they had a big fire. And I was the seaman on shore. So I died there. So I processed, as we always do. And, when you see that, you go to the last day and you let everything go into the light. You take care of all that. You take care of your inner body, outer body, etc. From that point on, I had no trouble being in San Francisco. I had a lot of business I did in San Francisco years later. I was in and out of San Francisco probably every 2 to 3 months. No problem. No problem at all. Never had. Look forward to going actually. That is how significant by doing a past life regression that actually works to release the emotional energy that is being caught is so important. It's not a matter of just voting. I used to call it, it's like going to the movies. You go, oh yeah, that's really nice. Sit down and, oh yeah, a lot of, rather this, all this pieces of information, but it's much, much more than that. It's being able to let go of all the emotions, the feelings, the decisions that you made. That's the big key. The feelings create the decisions, and the decisions we act out. And it's so important to be able to clear those decisions, or guaranteed you're going to go lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, running into similar things and remaking the same decision. Because we are basically an energy made up of all these decisions we've made with energy that creates, that we keep coming back to say, hey, look, you take care of this, deal with this. And of course, we don't always do that. But it's worth it. It really is. So on that note, I am going to say, no, that's my talk for today. Past lives, past life regressions. Yes, you've lived before. Yes, you will live again some other time, whether this planet or another planet. It's not so easy to get off this planet. That's what I always say. It's not so easy because you've got to be real clear in yourself. Otherwise, you're still here back learning because you haven't cleared yet. So, because this is an emotional planet and you have to deal with all these feelings and the decisions that you make from the feelings. So, it's all tied up there. And so, I wish you well. And thank you for watching. I'll be back again. Let's see, Sunday for Sunday Thought and Monday for Mental Mind Treatments. I'm back again next Wednesday. Bye now. Thank you.